We're joined by a special guest right from NYC, Mr. Pabel Martinez. Hi there, Pabel.
Hey, what's up, y'all? Pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much for coming on. I couldn't dare do an intro as good as yourself. Can I pass it over to you to let the listeners have a bit of a background on who you are and where you are and what you do?
Yeah, for sure. So Pabel Martinez, born and raised in New York, still in New York. And right now I'm a global account director at TikTok. I've been in tech for over 10 years. And recently I launched my own brand called Plural, which is a lifestyle and media company, which is on a mission to redefine professionalism.
Oh, that sounds great. How do you want to redefine it?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's funny because if you look at the definition of professionalism, it's a very simple definition. It's the skill or competence to be a professional, right? Or whatever your profession is, right? Skill or competence are the key words. It has nothing to do with how you look, how you speak, how you act, how you dress. But I feel like we, or many of us, have been taught that it is more than that. Like, I remember growing up, my grandfather used to tell me, do you see presidents with beards? Do you see them with do-rags? Do you see them with tattoos? All of those kind of things. And I was like, damn, nah. So I understand what he was trying to do. He was trying to protect people's perceptions. But what he was also trying to tell me to do is, like, I had to be more white in order to be successful, right? So even if you look up professionalism on Google Images, like, people don't look like me, right? So I'm trying to redefine, or at least remind people or reemphasize the fact that, like, you don't have to look a certain way in order to be successful in corporate America.
Yeah. Can I ask you a quite personal question?
Anything.
Thank you. Did it take you to get to the point of a global director for TikTok for you to have the voice to be able to say that? Because I think back to, I used to be an economics teacher, and from economics teacher, I went into technology, right? And I am now where I am, which is to run a software engineering consultancy with Ben. You know, if you asked me 5 or 6 years ago for me to correct my name to somebody, which is Amardeep, I wouldn't have corrected it. Now, if somebody gets my name wrong, you'd be damn sure I'm going to tell them how to pronounce my name correctly. Because if you can say Samantha, you can say Amardeep. It's as simple as that. But I think I've only got that confidence now. And I think it came a little bit with where I've got to where I want to be in life. Again, like a new teacher, probably wouldn't have said anything.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. I think it's a combination of two things. I actually got the confidence when I was at Facebook. So that was my last job. And it was both a positive and a negative experience. Like, on the negative side, it was the first time in my career where I was labeled aggressive. And I was like, me? I was like, I've never been labeled such a thing, right? And I was like, wow. And I felt like Facebook for me was like a dream job. I've always wanted to work there. And then I was finally there, and I was getting these microaggressions. I was getting hit with the racism, stuff like that. So that was a negative experience. But there's really dope experiences that once a year before COVID, they had a bunch of employee resource groups like Black Hat, Latin Hat, Women Hat, and they would fly out employees to headquarters if you self-identified as such, right? So one day I went to Black Hat Leadership Day. And it's the first time I've ever seen so many Black employees at a company like Facebook being themselves. And it was the first time I thought to myself, like, oh shit, they're not code switching, they're not acting. Like, and these are like VPs, executives, they're not just like individual contributors like I was. I was like, oh shit, if they can do it, I can do it. So a lot of what I do is really, like, when I say redefine professionalism, like, a lot of it is just building representation for people to feel seen and heard.
Exactly. Do you feel that, like, obviously we all work in technology here. Coming from teaching in the UK, I've got quite a few tattoos, and generally speaking, it's always been, you have to cover all your tattoos because you're a role model. So in my mind, I was like, okay, cool. So role models don't have tattoos, even though my dad's covered in tattoos, but okay, whatever. So I can't have tattoos and teach at the same time in the UK, which was fine, to be fair. I covered them up. I was young, and I did that continuously for 8 years. And then when I moved into technology, I saw people come in with unironed shirts, and, you know, they did what they wanted, but still, I'm not a white man, so I'm not going to do that. So I still went into work looking professional. Now, it's over the last few years, especially since I've met Ben and James, where they'll tell you, I'm always comes and she's always wearing a hoodie. And I do, like, now I'm always going to wear a hoodie, and I don't care. It doesn't take away from the skill set that I have. I'm still going to come into a company, deliver a technical roadmap, and walk out kind of being like, yeah, that's what I did. And I'm going to take credit for it, because I also feel like people don't take credit for it. I don't see people of color taking credit for what they do, should I say.
Yeah. I think it's so fascinating, because one of the first questions that I ask is from people on the podcast for me is, what does authenticity mean to you? Right. And I think it's such a buzzword, but we often don't think about like what it actually means. And I think often we think about some of these things that are clearly visible, right? And sometimes there's part of our authenticity that like people wouldn't even know unless you ask them. Like there's so many guests. Like there was a woman on my podcast that was in a sales role, and she was insecure about telling her clients that she was a mom because she didn't want to seem like, oh, like she's not fun because she's a mom, and then they wouldn't invite her out to drinks and all these things. Or, I mean, in the US, like I think people forget that like technically up to a couple of years ago, it wasn't illegal to discriminate based on sexual orientation. So like I had guests I had a guest that was scared. He was coming out of college. You know, coming out of college, you don't even put like, you don't have that many internships, right? So one of his experiences was like he was treasury of like the Pride Act group in college. He couldn't put that on his LinkedIn profile, or he didn't want to because he was scared that people would discriminate against him. There's so many layers to it, right? But I think the tattoo one is interesting because I put up a video the other day, and I think there's even like there's acceptance in tattoos when it comes to like anything below the neck. Like, why is there?
Like, yeah.
For example, like I put up a video of, I don't know if you know 21 Savage.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he has like a tattoo on his forehead, or like the Migos have tattoos on their face. And I'm like, oh, is this unprofessional? And a lot of people are like, oh, yes, because it's visible. But I'm like, you know that's biased based on your own experience, right? And it's fine to be biased. Like we're all biased, but like we need to start acknowledging the bias so that we can say, oh shit, I can learn from that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And if we take that and extrapolate it and put it into like a project. So for example, I deliver technical projects. That's what we do, right? Whether it's through products, engineers, design, whatever the case might be, and we deliver projects. Now, I always say to Ben, like the last thing I want is to be sat in a room trying to solve a problem with everyone who looks and speaks and talks like me, because then I'm getting no diverse opinion. I'm not getting diversity of thought. I'm getting diversity of nothing at this point. I'm getting 100 versions of me. Now, the more I mold myself into a certain fit to be like let's just say a white woman, because that is my competition, right? That is who I'm pinned against, is a white woman. If I put myself into that box, I'm going to start talking and thinking and acting like a white woman. And then suddenly there's no diverse opinion. And suddenly there's a problem on my project and I'm not going to deliver. I'm not going to hit a deadline. We're all coming up with the same answer, which might be right, but it might be wrong at the same time. So I think it goes from different layers of me just being confident in the workplace to also that diversity of thought, because I can also get like 15 people in a room that all look different. And if they try to fit into one particular box, they're all going to say the same thing. And I don't want to hear the same opinion 15 times. Absolutely not. For what? For why? Not for me. So I think that's really important when it comes to projects as well, and in delivery. So it goes from me seeing a really Indian, like my heritage is Indian and African, and if I could see me in a boardroom that I can physically see, not on the internet, not on LinkedIn, I walk into a company and I see it, I'll be thrilled. But for now, I have to just pave the way and figure it out for myself, and unfortunately make all the mistakes, you know. And it's interesting to go back to the tattoo point. I've got a tattoo on the back of my neck. You can't see it when my hair's down, but for a while my head was shaved. As soon as my hair went up, the head teacher would be like, hair down, or, you know, like a roll neck, something like that. So it's just interesting. And I also find it really interesting, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this, is who's making those judgments? Like I always think to myself, why are we sat here talking about being authentic in the workplace? Am I being judged as a woman by other women? Am I being judged by a brown woman by brown women? Or am I actually being judged by a white point of view? I just don't know anymore.
Yeah.
So that who am I being authentic for?
I think it has a lot to do with like the media that we see. But again, going back to representation, it's just like what we're accustomed to seeing, right? And yeah, it is really fascinating. But I think it's funny because I actually put up that video of the like 21 Savage and Quavo. I think I put up a video of like his tattoos, and I was asking people, is this unprofessional? And this one guy commented, he was like, let's be honest, like if he was in a client facing role, like I wouldn't hire him because I'm scared of what my clients would think. So like we're not only dealing with our own bias, but we're making assumptions on the bias that our clients have as well, right? So when you ask about like who we're making decisions for, it's not only us, but because think about him, like as a small business owner or whatever business owner he is, like he was like, that's my livelihood. Like I'm gonna make these decisions and I'm gonna hire someone that is more I don't know, traditionally professional, if you will, whatever that means. compared to like taking a risk, quote unquote, on someone that is like challenging those stereotypes.
Yeah, and it's interesting as well, because I was just going to bring it into recruitment, because does that then change how we hire? Of course it does. Like, everybody can talk as much as they want as, oh, we're not biased, or we hide a name, etc., etc. But the fact of the matter is, we're all biased in some sort of way, and it's worrying, because if I feel like that and I run a company, Ben also has another company that's a recruitment firm, in a technical recruitment firm. So you then worry, am I hiring because I think the client wants a particular type of person? You know, people have not put my CV forward before because my name is Amardeep Sirha and it doesn't sound like a British name. Well, A, it's not a British name, it's Indian. But B, I've got the strongest Yorkshire. I don't know if you know Yorkshire in the UK, but I've got the strongest Yorkshire accent ever. So as soon as they get me on the phone, they're like, "Oh, am I speaking to Amardeep?" Well, yeah, you are. You know, and it's worrying, because are we, even though we're very aware of it, are we still behaving and doing those same practices to not help the generations below us? I worry that I am still doing it. I don't know what more I can do.
I think from my perspective, as like, you know, the middle-aged white guy here having this convo, like I like listening to you guys go on. I think what's quite evident is that we're all very, you know, passionate about creating awareness, right? And that's where it starts. And I think it's the stories that, for me personally, as that middle-aged white guy, it's the stories that I've heard. Amardeep has lots of different examples of when she's, you know, come into technology and kind of like maybe not mistreated, but how kind of wordings were from different people who didn't mean to cause offence but were causing offence. And for me, that's what it's all about. I had a podcast with a chap called David Germain, who's the CIO of Royal Sun Alliance, one of the biggest insurance companies in the world. Black guy, one of the nicest chaps you could ever meet. He told a fantastic story. Well, it's not a fantastic story, it's a horrible story, but it's an important story, where he, when he was growing up, he's a big black guy, a rugby player, and he had long dreadlocks. And he went to, he had 13 interviews, and he was rejected at every single position. And he shaved off his dreadlocks for interview number 14, and he got the job.
That's the one he got.
And it's like, you know, when you hear these stories, it blows your mind, because, you know, the UK and the technology market in London is extremely diverse, and you kind of don't think that this exists. But the good, where I think you know, us guys can make a difference is talking about this and giving examples, and, you know, and creating the awareness, because it's important stories to be told, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think also, like, that's why I preach to be your most authentic self, for everybody, right? Because I think that potentially, this is maybe a story that I'm making up in my head, but like the people that were interviewing him have a certain bias with black men with dreads of his size and stature, potentially, right? And they've never seen someone that looks like him in a CIO role, right? What if, but now people are seeing him in a CIO role, but now with dreads, right? What if there were many engineers or people in technology that looked like him with his dreads, and then all of them being their most authentic self? Then the perception may start to change around, like, oh, you know what? People with dreads that look like him of his stature are actually engineers, right? And that's how that perception changed. But unfortunately, many of us have to assimilate and hide who we are in certain ways, to the point where we can never create that representation of black men with dreads of a stature in technology. You know what I mean? So that's why, although it's really difficult, I want to, like, I will never shave my beard. I refuse to. And it's not because I'm ashamed of my chin, but it's because I want to build that representation for people, that says, like, your beard has nothing to do with how you look. I mean, till this day, there are policies in place, because people also think that it's as easy as, like, oh, grow a beard. Like, no, there are actual policies in place at certain organizations that tell you to shave your beard, right? Like, it's in the finance industry. I don't know if you know, but the Yankees as well, but it's a baseball team in the States, in New York. They don't allow their players to have facial hair, right? So one of the images that I created, if you actually look at this, it's Jorge Posada. I'm trying to reimagine, like, does he look different with the chain, earrings, and beard, right? So, and I did this with Alex Rodriguez and a few other Yankees players, but, like, I think that representation is really, really important.
Yeah, it's interesting that you make that point, actually, about the beard. My other half, he went to private school in the UK, and he's of mixed heritage. He's Indian and Jamaican heritage. And of course, the hair, the facial hair is a little bit tougher. It's different to normal. Not that's an awful word. It's different to someone else's hair. It's a bit tougher. And at school, they weren't allowed to come in without being clean shaven. Sort of when they get into like the older years. And he said to me, he told me this awful story where he would fight with his teachers, and I said to him, "Why didn't you just shave?" And he said, "Because if you keep shaving black hair, like it causes like horrific damage to your skin because it's just so much thicker." And I didn't need to shave it really, but he wasn't allowed to play football. He wasn't allowed to do lots of things unless he shaved. So eventually what did he do? He shaved it and just caused damage to his face. And I think to myself, if that happens when he's about 16, 17 years old, there's no hope if it's starting that young, that, you know, it's different from when somebody with fairer or thinner hair shaves their face. It doesn't make a difference to him, but when he shaves his face, it's causing him actual damage. But I didn't know it went so far into when you get older, sort of baseball teams, etc. Because my religious heritage, if I was to tick a box, is Sikhism. So if you're a devout Sikh, you're going to have a beard, right? So I wouldn't even know how they would have to cope with things like that, because it's at that point it turns from you know how you want to look to being like that because of a religious reason. So I wouldn't even know where to start with that. It's worrying, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Can I pick up on the pictures? And so, like, you know, on the podcast you're talking about the Yankees player. I guess people, you know, guys watching this on YouTube will excuse me, will obviously be able to see it, but can you talk us through some of the pictures on the back, because you started explaining it before we went online. I think it sounds like really interesting stories.
Yeah, I mean, I always say that the stories, or you know, I try to say the experiences, because I think when people say stories, people often think they're made up. So the experiences, the art, the apparel, for me, they're all vehicles really to raise awareness for, again, this conflict that many of us face between authenticity and professionalism. But if I'm being honest and a little bit ambitious here, what I really want for the company is for this to be vehicles for policy change. Like, again, there are policies in place that legally prevent us from being ourselves, right? If I could change, let's say at one organization, not even at a federal level or a city, I think that's a dream, right? Like, imagine plural was the reason why that Supreme Court decision was changed in the US that made it illegal to discriminate based on sexual orientation. You know what I mean? Like there was recently a law that passed in New York that made it illegal to discriminate based on hair. So previously to that, it was literally legal to discriminate based on like dreads, locks, all of those kind of things, right? So imagine, based on the awareness and the images that I put out, I can change the policy of the Yankees to say like, no, now you can have facial hair. Or like now you can have dreads, because they also don't allow braids, dreads, afros. They don't allow any of those things, right? So some of it is based on like a lot of it is based on the experiences, right? So like that's my personal experience with beards. But another one is a lot of women come in and say like curly hair is unprofessional many times. So every day they actually straighten it. And going back to damage, this literally damages your hair because you're straightening every single time, right? So or braids considered unprofessional. So this image of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's a politician or congresswoman in the US, even like big hoop earrings, nameplate. So I'm trying to like reimagine what that looks like. Even this one says Hoy se baila. It was just like a classic example of every time I went to work in the morning, every Monday, it's like, oh, what did you do this weekend? Oh my God, I would lie my ass off. I would literally study white popular American culture to feel relatable and not feel judged. Because in reality, what I was doing was smoking hookah or shisha, as you all call it, and dancing salsa, right? But I was ashamed to say that because that wasn't relatable. So what I would say instead was, oh, I had this amazing brunch in Soho. You should try this place. So good. Or like, I would say, oh my God, I think I'm going to like a Bruce Springsteen concert. I don't listen to Bruce Springsteen, right? So a lot of this is just like either insecurities and me trying to like reimagine what some of these like pop iconic figures look like. If they were themselves.
When was the change then? Sorry, Pabel. Because like, you know, from where did you go from one to the other? Because you know, because you've obviously lived through these experiences, haven't you?
Yeah. When I was at Facebook, again, it was a dream job. And when I hit before I hit a year, maybe like 6 months in, I was like, I'm not going to make it here. I just hit a wall where I found myself to be dedicating way too much time to the code switching. Because when people think about code switching, I think they think about like, oh, I just changed my vernacular a little bit. Like, no, I was literally dedicating time on the weekends to do research and study. So like whatever I heard my coworkers talking about, like if they talked about watching Riverdale on Netflix, I don't personally watch that show. But I literally binge watched 3 seasons just to be able to talk about it at work. You know what I mean? And it's a little bit different at Facebook too, because it was the most like in-depth sales role that I've been in. So I wasn't just code switching from 9 to 5. I was code switching from like the 5 to 9 of the client engagement, the dinners and all those things. And how you really get them to like you is, again, be relatable is what I thought, right? So it just became exhausting and I had a breaking point and I was about to get fired, I thought, because I wasn't doing well. So I was like, you know what, if I'm gonna get fired or if I'm gonna quit, I'm gonna go out on my own terms. And I had a meeting with my coworkers and I literally told them, like, I've been acting and lying to y'all for the past year. And they were like, what? I was like, don't worry, you'll see. And then I started being my authentic self.
Yeah. It's a shame that I think about how many times people I may have even been around that have to do that. I definitely have to agree with the fact that I definitely have to lie most of the time when I'm having conversations, because, you know, I'm a bit of a spectrum person. I really what I listen to is not just a bit of like pop and R&B. I really love hardcore rap music, but equally you might find me dancing and bopping along to Britney Spears. I like both, and I think people can't sometimes accept that either. Either I am the silly bubbly girl from up north who really likes pop music, or I'm that hardcore can really throw it down on a mic MC girl, and there's no in between. I have to fit into somebody's box. But actually, people actually got to know me a little bit. They know that I am a bit of both. But how many times I've sat in a room and you're right, building those relationships with people that need to be authentic. Am I actually authentic? I don't know. I think you made me even question myself a little bit there. Am I really being who I am, or am I conforming to a box? You know, there's been times I've done quite a lot of talks and podcasts, and someone has said, don't wear a hoodie. And I'm like, I wear hoodies like all day, every day. It makes me feel the most comfortable. If I'm comfortable in my skin and what I'm wearing, I'll be more comfortable on camera. Like, you're really making me question actually whether I'm fully authentic.
As someone who knows you well as your business partner, and I don't think you are, but I feel like you've gone on a journey as well. And I talk about, again, you're right. I like to say experience. Thank you for picking me up. I think it's the right way, isn't it? But Amardeep, your story when you joined Sky, because that was your first role in technology, and when you were in the canteen and when you were eating food and how that was.
Oh my God, yeah. Well, obviously, my heritage is Indian, right? We eat Indian, like in India, they don't have a full English for breakfast. And I was having some breakfast and it just happened to be an Indian version of food, right? And I was sat having it, and we were all sat around having, obviously warm my food a bit. It didn't smell like curry, but clearly it smelled like curry, right? It didn't smell like English food, let's put it that way. And somebody was like, oh, that's absolutely disgusting. How can you eat curry for breakfast? Now, whilst I was choking on my food listening to this comment, actually another person did jump in, a white person jumped in and was like, what do you think they eat in India, for example? Do you think they have a full English at breakfast? And kind of like put that person in the place, but in a nice way. But I was absolutely mortified. Did I eat Indian food in the morning ever again? Nope. I wasn't going to, because I was absolutely mortified. And that was like my first venture into a professional world after teaching in public schools. So everything about it was just that I don't think I would have ever heard that in teaching. I don't think another teacher would ever say that to me. But it was an eye-opener.
But here's the point, because when you told me that story, I kind of thought, could I have been that person? And I could have been. I could have gone, because it's just, I wouldn't have thought about it.
Yeah.
Now, again, these are all experiences and lessons that you learn, but I could have been that person. Generally could have gone, like, just said it as it came into my head. Cool, you're having a curry for breakfast when I'm eating a full English or a sausage sandwich.
Yeah.
Or, you know, and these are the messages that, you know, we're quite, well, we're very keen to push out. You know, we're a technical consultancy, but we want to be a bit different, right? We want to have a bit of a message, and you know, we talk corporate social responsibility is very important now. But, you know, some of the stuff that we've been talking about, the chap at RSA put me in touch with a company, with a charity called Black Thrive, which is a South London kind of second chance charity, and it's for kids who are from a deprived area and you know, have maybe got themselves in the wrong kind of hood and got themselves in a bit of trouble, and you know, they want to. And they're never given a second chance. They never have the chance to get into technology, and they need these kind of stories to be inspired to them. And that's probably taken to my next point, like, how do we kind of carry on creating the change? Because Amazon, I think that's a cool of course, that's the wrong way to get, but it's the right kind of charity to partner with. Like there's, we have our corporate social responsibility, but if we can do that, but also kind of work it in a way where we're creating better awareness and, better diversity and inclusion and kind of, being a bit of, Amardeep's a role model, it's someone who's been in teaching and your background with female in technology, this is these guys are going to look up to. How do you think, you've got a platform, right? You've got your podcast, you got, a very well-known organization. How do we continue to create the awareness?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're doing, what I'm doing as far as like sharing those experiences is one thing. Like to your point, it's about having like raising that awareness. And I think it's really important to note that like it isn't just like quote unquote white people that have to learn. Like I have a lot of unlearning to do as well. Like I said, I truly believe that we all have some sort of bias. And I think the sooner that we can admit it is the sooner that we can acknowledge it and then we'll actually work on it. You know what I mean? Like I'll be transparent. Like I used to have a bias because I love going to cafes, and if the barista isn't like tatted up, looking like a hipster, a little on the homeless side, I'm like, is that really going to be a good coffee? You know what I mean? So I had to work on that though. Like I walked in and someone was even looking like really, I don't know, corporate-y, and I was like, oh, this isn't gonna be good. But I gave the person a chance. I think we need to like acknowledge it and not let it impact our decision making, right? Because I could have easily looked at that, had bias, turned around, went to another cafe. But I tried it, and that person changed my perception. I was like, this is a good cup of Joe, But I think the more that we can do that,
yeah. Sorry, I think that's really important. I think the point is that we have to all do it, and we have to look in the mirror and accept the fact that we've got a few biases. Maybe just admit them to ourselves, and then go and challenge our own biases. I definitely had a lot of that growing up with, I just never thought that white people would like me. I'm going to always smell like curry, apparently. And, I'm going to have all these biases against me. So why should I even try and entertain that conversation? In fact, I'd rather fall into stereotype. I was so arrogant growing up. I used to think, no, I'm going to fall into stereotype just to spite you almost. And it burnt me in the end. So I think I still have a lot of unlearning to do as well. And we try really hard in our company. When we partner with clients, we'll walk away from potential work if we don't feel like it falls in line with our ethos. And same with employees. Like we want to breed a culture of just being authentic, like take your labels off. We don't encourage labels. We don't encourage anything. Just come to work, do your job, ask us for help if you need it. And that's it. And I can't imagine we'd ever partner with a client that has any sort of discriminations that are apparent, at least.
Yeah, I mean, there are also policies and recruiting tools, because I think when you think about this challenge, it's sort of like on one side there's just diversity, right? From a quantity standpoint, you just need to get more diverse people in the door. And when you even look at recruiting practices, like there are things that some people wouldn't consider discriminatory from a diversity standpoint, but they kind of are, right? Because if you think about it, like, oh yeah, we want to increase our diversity numbers, but we're only going to recruit from Ivy League schools. Oh, like who goes to those Ivy League schools? Oh, not diverse candidates, right? So like you're really recruiting from the same pool of people that actually look like the people that you're already recruiting, right? Or there's another one where like major tech companies only recruit from other major tech companies. It's like an unknown secret, and no one's going to admit it, but it's true. And in addition, they will pay more to recruit from those companies. Like, again, no one's going to admit this, but I will go on record and say that I know this from most companies, right? So like if you come from a Facebook, like they're going to pay me more than someone that comes from like, I don't know, CNN. I'm just making this up, right? But like, because it's the major tech company, right? But if you look at even Facebook, like the people that are coming from there, like most of them don't look like me. So although it's not saying like I'm not going to recruit Black people, in reality, the policies that you're saying are kind of like, I'm not going to recruit Black people. So they're not like outright saying it, but I think we have to be like, again, like look at all the bias that we're doing in all of our practices, not just in our like daily habits. Because I think a lot of things from a recruiting standpoint are also biased as well. Yeah, agreed. I think that's a really good point. I think that's a really good point. I do worry about the future generations. I worry that the world is becoming a little bit more unkind, especially with social media and the pressures that it puts on younger people. I think there's a lot of good in it, but I think it's misused and it's abused a lot.
I definitely don't want to be sat around a table with any sort of professional decision making and all the opinions are the same. I want the middle-aged white man. I want the young trainee. I want all the in between as well. So I think that's what makes up a nice diverse opinion. You'll get like a great solution at the end of it as well. That's a really good point, Ben. I feel like you're about to say something.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? From the recruitment standpoint, I every single customer, I've been in recruitment now for 16 years, Pabel, and there was, I don't know, maybe 12 years ago, I remember going to JP Morgan for talking about going on the PSL, and that was when I was part of another company. So I've had 2 companies now in recruitment, but I remember they sat down and one of the questions they asked me was, "What's my diversity policy?" And like, I was a product of my environment, which was actually a 60-man, young 20s, mainly white, cocky sales platform, right? And no one had ever given me, it was more kind of like, hardcore KPI driven recruitment industry. And no one really kind of spoke about the importance of diversity. We were talk about appearances, we were wearing shirts, suits and ties and all this stuff. And they asked me about diversity, and I just melted because I had no, answer to a policy. And now when I look at it, it's the most. I go to the clients like, "What's your diversity? Like, how do you do that? How can we improve it? What's your kind of media platform saying? What's what's the makeup, the breakup down of your team?" That's one of the first things I ask when I start recruiting for team. Like, what's the split for guys and girls? And this, he's like, okay, and if it's not so good, the first thing I'm saying is, how are we going to improve that? This is what this client's done or that client's done, and I kind of feel like it, yes, it's social media changes a lot of how we are now, but I look back from in the last 10 years, and I feel as the middle-aged white guy, right, that has improved, that is improving. Do you feel like that's the case in the States, in New York, or?
Well, I would say, I remember even when I started working at Facebook and I was there for 4 years, like, if an unarmed Black man got killed by police officers, no one would talk about it when I first got there. I'm talking about like executives would just be like, "Oh yeah, sales numbers, we're crushing it, blah, blah, blah." Towards the end of my time, people would acknowledge it. Like, people would have, and again, those are very uncomfortable conversations, right? So to take even 2 minutes or 5 minutes out of a meeting, and again, there's so many things happening. 1, it's uncomfortable. 2, there's so many things happening, right? It just wasn't a thing, right? So that's something else that I noticed. But at the same time, I'm a little skeptical on why people are doing it, right? I don't think people are doing it just because, like, all of a sudden people care about Black people. What I also heard, and this isn't, matter of fact, no, this was at Facebook, but I'm sure this has happened in other companies as well. I saw a correlation between them keeping managers accountable. So now when you get rated on your performance review, they will get judged on how inclusive their team was or felt. So now that it's in your performance review and it hits your bank account, now people are starting to be like, "Oh, I need to," just like people say like, "Oh, part of my performance review is sales, I need to email 20 people a day," kind of thing. I'm just making this up, right? People are now saying, "I need to have diverse conversations once a week or something," because it impacts their dollars. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I think often diversity and inclusion is thought of as like a social good, so people don't really do it. It's kind of like, "Oh yeah, I should volunteer once a week or like once a month or once a quarter." It's like a nice to have until you have it impact people's money and people realize that it's a business imperative and not a social good. Like, people won't really do anything.
Listen, Pabel, I think we could. I'm really enjoying this conversation. We could probably talk for hours about it, to be honest with you. We think of the time difference. We don't want to take up too much of your time. I know you're a busy guy, but this question: do you ever come to the UK with work, or you ever come over here in general? Or
I've been once. I actually used to work with Dyson.
Oh, did you really? What did you do with Dyson?
When I was at Facebook, it was just one of the accounts that I managed. So I helped them with their social media strategy for Facebook specifically.
They were like Bristol way, or they're not in London. They're kind of like west of the UK, right? They're Swindon or Bristol or
I
something.
feel like everybody outside of the UK thinks that the UK is one thing and it's London.
Yes, but they actually came to our office for the day.
Oh, in London, yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Reason I ask is because love to meet if you ever come over again, because one thing that we are very keen to do, but COVID just keeps on messing it up, man, is doing is having events. So as you can tell, this is something that's close to our hearts, and I think as a startup business, you can the good thing is we're not changing turning the Titanic, right? We're starting from scratch. So our values and our kind of beliefs, from corporate social responsibility to educating clients to the podcast to everything, is geared around sharing these experiences and talking about it and creating more awareness. And we're going to hold events about this, and some of the guys that we've mentioned on this pod are going to keep keen to get involved. So yeah, listen, man, it'd be awesome if you do come over, give us a shout. We'd love to kind of get you involved and to meet up and to kind of push the brand over this side of the pond as well.
I would love that. Who knows? I'll go just for the event,
Yeah, man.
Yeah. We also have like a really great brunch place that we can take you to.
Over some drinks.
But no, is there anything else that you'd like to say, Pabel, before you leave? Like we do hopefully get a lot of listeners and get a nice big following. So if you want to say anything, please feel free to say it.
Yeah, no, I mean, one thing I would just leave you with is just listen, like, I know it's difficult to be yourself and bring yourself to work, but the only way that we will redefine professionalism is if we all show up as ourselves. Like, going back to that earlier example, like, I want people, next time they see someone with that's Black, that has dreads, that's of a certain, size and stature, not to have their bias, but instead think, he looks like a CIO. This guy looks like an engineer, right? And the only way that we can do that is if we all our most authentic selves. And again, I know it's difficult, but it's the only way that we can do it. And if you want to follow me, you can follow me on all social medias on plural or plural. That's PLURAWL. And the podcast is called Quien tú eres, which translates to Who Are You?
Amazing. Fantastic.
Excellent.
And if people reach out to you on LinkedIn, that's, I guess, a lot of the time we kind of like, we'll put some clips from this onto LinkedIn, and we'll do some little blogs and stuff off the back of it over the next 2 or 3 months. People are okay to reach out to you and connect you there and ask you questions?
Yes, for sure. I love LinkedIn.
Amazing.
Excellent.
Well, listen, thank you very, very much for your time. Really, really appreciate it. Have a fantastic weekend. And I'm sure we'll be speaking again soon in the future.
Definitely.
Sounds good.
Take care.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.